I don't knit for money. I was asked by a family member who I really like to knit a vest for her partner. I said yes. It's for his birthday. There's a deadline. If you want to know why I don't knit for money, why I said yes to this commission, how I went about completing this project, and how I would charge for it if I were properly charging for this commission, which I'm not, then follow me into the Maker's Lounge, where I'm going to have a giant martini and I'll tell you the whole story. Yes, I had to break out the giant martini glass for this one. I don't know what I was thinking. However, here we are. The story's coming. In honor of the fact that this commission is a vest, I decided to wear my Smokeshow vest, even though it's late June. But it's a little bit cloudy today. It's not super hot, and I feel quite comfy at the moment. We'll see in 10 minutes how I still feel in my 100% Baby Yak Smokeshow vest. Moving on. Like I said, as a rule, I don't knit for money. The main reason for that, there are actually a lot of reasons I don't knit for money, but the main reason I don't is that for most projects, we all know how long knitting takes, and you're not going to earn even minimum wage charging for knitting by the hour. Right? I don't know about you, but my knitting time is precious. As I have said before, I have a job, I have YouTube, and I have him, and my handsome man, and family, and friends, and all those things that take up my time. So my knitting time is worth a lot to me. So if I charged appropriately for my time for knitting, no one could afford me. Okay, almost no one. Bill Gates, call me. And so when I get asked, would you knit me X? I'll pay you. I end up in that uncomfortable position where if I say yes to one person and then I have to say no to others, awkward. However, having said all that, every once in a while, I do give in and take on a knitting commission. And this time I'm doing it mostly as a favor for an aunt who I really like, really like. So I'm in it. Let's do it right. I'm going to show you the whole process, the considerations, the preparation, the knitting, the finishing, and then at the end, I'm going to talk about how I normally charge for commissions and why I charge that way. Planning is incredibly important when you're doing commission work. You really want to limit having to redo any of your work. So you don't want to be experimenting or improvising or guessing or hoping. You need to plan. The first part of the planning is understanding the scope of the project. So get as much information as you can from the person who has asked you to do the commission and make sure that you really understand exactly what it is they want. If they're being vague about anything, make sure that you ask them if it's okay if you make the decisions. You want to hear that from them. Don't just assume that's what they want you to do. I was asked on March 15th to do this project as a gift for a birthday in July. We'll come back to that July part. July is a whole month. Where did my brain go? End of July, at least middle of July. You'll see where this is going. I started planning right away, but I didn't immediately get to the knitting. I was told that this was a garment that was likely to be worn a lot. He apparently has one that's very similar and he wears it constantly. They asked for it to be real wool and machine washable. I talked them out of the machine washable part. As it turned out, she went and looked at his favorite vest that he already has and discovered that it is wool and remembered that she does hand wash it when it needs washing. To make sure you're going to get a good fit, especially when it's for someone you don't have access to, this person that I'm knitting this for is way far away from where I am in the East Kootenays of British Columbia. I do not have access to them. Fortunately, because he already has a vest that he absolutely loves, I asked her if she could please lay it out flat and take a bunch of measurements off of it for me to work from. So she went off to do that, and then she texted me and said, "Darn, he must be wearing it again. He went bowling. I'll have to try later." She suggested that it could be shades of gray, blue, or both, maybe a cable. She was really going to leave that part up to me. The one thing that she did say is it didn't need to be fancy. He is not a fashion diva. So off I went in search of a pattern. And you know what? It was much harder to find a good quality, plain vanilla man's vest. Much harder than you would think. But I did finally find one. It's from Churchmouse, and it's called His Vest. How perfect is that? There is absolutely nothing fancy about this vest. It's a straight up, well-designed, classic V-neck, 2x2 ribbing, easily adaptable to different types of fit. My intention was to use this pattern as a template and apply my own adaptations to it if I decided I wanted something more than just a plain vanilla vest. My next task was deciding on the type of yarn and the color. Now, I'd already been told that they wanted wool, piece of cake, and for a color, I decided to go with navy, of course. Who wouldn't want navy? I knit everything in navy. I went to my good friend Smitta's online shop called Your Next Knit, and I found this John Arbon Textiles wool. This wool is 33% Blueface Leicester, or BFL it's sometimes called, 33% Falklands Merino, and 33% Zwarbles. I had to look Zwarbles up. I'd never heard of a Zwarble sheep. Now I think it might be my favorite. I absolutely love the hand of this yarn. It is just yummy. Yes, it is a little bit on the woolly side. It's not superwash, and it's got a really nice marl of a very lovely blue and then a dark, dark navy with a bit of a brown undertone. That's got to be one of the sheep, possibly the Zwarbles. I don't know. Can you see the brown undertone there? It's very subtle, but it's a really lovely yarn. So what do I do next? I swatch. My first swatch, I was playing around with a bit of a cable. I thought maybe I would put a bit of a cable into this. So I went to my stitch dictionaries and I found one that I liked the look of, and I popped it into my Stitch Mastery software. It is the software that I use for producing cables when I need a cable. If you're interested, I will put the link to Stitch Mastery down in the show notes and you can go down there and take a peek at it. So here is my cable chart. Here is the resulting cable. Let me turn it to the side a little bit so you can you see the cable a little bit, kind of subtle? Yeah, well, you know what? This cable was a lot of work and it's really hard to see. So you know what I decided? No cable. And the other thing I realized when I was knitting the swatch, when I finished it, was, boy, you know, I measured my gauge and I had a heck of a lot of stitches packed in there between my running markers. And I thought, what's going on here? And then I went and looked at the yarn again and realized, hey, wait a minute, this is a 4-ply. This is a fingering weight yarn. And I looked at the pattern, thought I was pretty sure this pattern was a heavier weight than fingering weight. And sure enough, it calls for DK. I was like, what happened? Anyway, long story short, I ordered what I thought was worsted weight. I ordered what Smitta thought was worsted weight. And it turned out the yarn was not worsted weight. However, absolutely no problem. I looked at the yarn that I had, realized that because it was fingering weight, I really had twice as much yarn as I needed. And so I thought, I'll just hold it double. I bet I can get gauge holding it double. And wouldn't you know, I held it double, swatched again in plain old stockinette, and it was perfect. So there we are, off to the races. The next part of the planning was all about making sure that I got the size right. So I referred to the photos that I was sent with the measurements, and I looked at the schematic in the pattern. Remember, I don't know my right from left. I looked at the schematic in the pattern. I took the schematic and I blew it up on my printer to almost full page size. And then I applied my blueprinting technique. There's the link to the blueprint video if you don't know what I'm talking about. You may end up seeing that blueprint link up there just about every video I make. You might be getting sick of it. If you are, just ignore it. And I compared the measurements on the schematic to the measurements that I was given and picked the size in each area, highlighted it, and then decided how many stitches to cast on, how many rows I was going to do. And I know how many rows to do because I have my swatch and I knew my row gauge. So I could use my blueprint to notate cast on in 3.75 millimeter, do this many rows in 2x2 rib, switch to the bigger needle, do this many rows for the body, cast off, bind off, bind off, bind off, bind off, decreases, start the neck shaping. All of that was on my blueprint. So now that I've got all that, I'm ready to knit. Okay, now my planning is complete. I understand the scope of the project. I've selected a pattern. I've selected the yarn. I've done my swatching and I've created my blueprint, and now I'm ready to knit. Did I start knitting? No, I did not. By now it was the end of March, early April, and I thought, oh, I've got loads of time. July. This isn't due until July. Wow. Gotta tell you. There came a day towards the end of May when I thought, now what date in July was that? And I went back and looked at the text messages from my aunt, and turns out his birthday was July 1st. Oh, now I was under the gun. So, good thing I had all my planning done. All I had to do was pick up my yarn and my needles and get at it. And voila, here are the finished front and back, blocked and ready for seaming. You can see on the back here, I still have my running markers in there. I usually take them out before I block, but I left them in just to show you that I actually do use the running markers. So these were the markers up the side seam to make sure that my back side seam matched my front side seam exactly. If you don't already know about running markers, there's a video link right up here. I will also put it down in the description box. You can go watch my running markers video and find out all about them. They could change your knitting. And I will apologize in advance for the quality of that video. I was new. I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, Oscar, I really still don't. It's true. But I knew even less back then. So the quality is a little sketchy. The sound is a little weird, but bear with it. I will eventually remake that video into a better quality one. The information is there. Go watch it. So running markers up the side to make sure the sides match, and then running markers through the... you know what? I don't know my left from my right at the best of times. I really can't do it in a camera when everything is backwards. Running markers up the armhole, capturing the repeats of the decreases and Yeah, you get it, right? Go watch the video. Go watch the video. So, done, ready to seam. This locking marker is here holding the center stitch for the V-neck. I am going to seam this up, and then we will come back and I will show you how I pick up stitches for the neckline and the armholes, and we'll see if it matches what the pattern says to do. It often doesn't. So we'll find that out. See you in a bit. All right, good morning. It's 2 days later and it's 8:30 a.m. and I don't usually film this early in the morning, but I have to get this done. It has to go in the express post tomorrow by 3 p.m. in order to make it to the person whose birthday it is on Monday, I think. Anyway, you don't care about that. I'm on a deadline. So here I am, first thing in the morning, filming. 2 days later, I have done the lovely ribbing on the armholes and we're ready to pick up the stitches for the neck. Now, the ribbing on the armholes looks great, but it didn't look great the first time. I had to do it twice. So what did I do? When it was time to pick up the stitches and do the ribbing on the armholes, I just grabbed the needle that was in the bag and I looked at the 4mm needle and I thought, yeah, that's the right needle for the ribbing, because I worked the body on a 4.5, and off I went and did the ribbing on both armholes and then looked at it and went, this ribbing looks like crap. What the hell? And then I picked up the pattern and my blueprint page and saw that I knit the ribbing on 3 3/4. And no, I did not knit the body of the sweater on 4.5. I knit it on 4. I knit all of this on a 4mm needle, and somehow that just wiped out of my brain. So here's a pro tip. Being an experienced knitter does not mean that you don't make mistakes. It just means that you make bigger mistakes faster because you think you know better. Always check. Anywho, I ended up going down 2 needle sizes. So I actually knit one of these armholes 3 times to get it right. I did one armhole on a 3 3/4 and I still didn't like the ribbing. I cannot abide untidy armhole ribbing. So I went down 1 more needle size to a 3.5 and perfection. I also like to make sure that there is no binding in my armholes. So I like to make sure they're nice and stretchy. So I did not just bind off with a standard bind off in pattern. I went hunting for a bind off that would match my cast on at the bottom edge of the sweater. I chose to cast this on with a twisted longtail cast on, also known as a German twisted cast on. And I couldn't remember what bind off matched the German twisted cast on, so I went on a little hunt. And the first one I found was kind of an odd stitch 2 stitches and then go into the back of them and knit them together and then knit another and then go into the back and knit them together. And you can either do this on the needles or with a crochet hook. It's all a little bit awkward, and I didn't like the look of it. It left kind of gappy spaces at the top. If you've ever done any of the stretchy bind offs, they often look like there's a little space, almost like a yarn over. And that's because you're doing like extra stitches and then binding it off, and there's just more yarn in that upper edge, which is fine. If you need a really stretchy bind off, by all means do those. But for the armhole on sort of a more tailored vest look, I didn't want that. So the next option that I found in my research was the Icelandic bind off, which is that, if you've never tried it, it's that really weird one where you knit 1 stitch, you put it back on the left hand needle, you go through that stitch, through the next stitch, wrap the yarn, and then pull the needle out through this weird little triangle down at the bottom. I'm not going to demonstrate it for you because there are tons of good YouTube videos out there already on the Icelandic bind off. Just go find one. I'll put one down in the description box for you and you can go check it out. One that I think is worth watching because I know they're not, not all apples are the same apples, right? You know what I mean. Anyway, the Icelandic bind off turned out to be a perfect match for the twisted cast on here. Hang on, I will bring this closer so you can have a look. See, they look pretty darn close. They look good. And they have this nice little beaded edge, and they're both, decently stretchy without looking sloppy. Yay. So now let's talk about picking up the stitches. And I know that I said I was curious to see how this particular pattern suggested to pick up stitches because I'm pretty fussy about it and I often don't follow the pattern, and you don't have to either. But I was pleasantly surprised. This Churchmouse pattern is particularly good at giving extra instruction on these little finishing bits. I'm very impressed, even with pictures and arrows. And here, I'll show you. See? Instructions to help you pick up stitches beautifully. They do a very good job. They pick up stitches exactly the way I would. They go 1 to 1 into a horizontal edge, exactly like I would. They do 3 stitches to 4 rows. They pick up 3 stitches per 4 rows on a vertical edge, exactly like I would. And then in the curves, they kind of pick up what seems right. Now, I get it. What seems right? Come on. What am I supposed to do with that? Well, here's what you do. Let's talk about it for a second. There aren't a lot of curved spots on this V neckline. It's more like this is kind of a vertical, almost, because it's such a steep V. There's a little bit of curve here. This is definitely vertical, and across the back neck is horizontal. So across the back neck is a piece of cake. We're just going to pick up 1 stitch into the V of every stitch below it. Every stitch. Then down the actual horizontal, like straight up and downs, or whatever is roughly close. You might have done some every 4th row increases. That's still pretty vertical. You're going to go into the rows right beside each vertical stitch and take 1, 2, 3, skip 1, 1, 2, 3, like that. Now, in terms of the actual number of stitches you're supposed to pick up, you don't have to pick up the actual number that the pattern tells you to. It's really suggesting that you pick up that many stitches to get the ribbing similar to what the designer had intended. In other words, not too many stitches so it looks sloppy, and not too few stitches so that it stretches or pulls. Not everyone's gauge, row gauge, stitch gauge, tension is going to be exactly the same. Not everyone's using the same kind of yarn. It's all going to have an effect on what that edging looks like. What's important is what kind of stitch are you using for the edging. In this pattern, it's a 2x2 rib. So I need to make sure that whatever I pick up, it comes out to a multiple of 4. With other kinds of edgings, like garter stitch, or even 1x1 rib, or folded hems, which often are my preference because they look really sharp. They wear well. Anyway, I don't need to give you all the details. You can go watch this video where I talked all about how to do folded hems, and you even get a hand demo on that one. So the important thing is that we use the rules of picking up stitches for the verticals, for the horizontals, and the verticals, and then count how many stitches you picked up. And then in those shaped areas, you can figure out how many more stitches you'll need to pick up in those spots to get the number the pattern suggested, or if not exactly that, to at least get to the multiple of 4 or whatever multiple you need. I know, clear as mud as usual. But I promise that, again, there are hundreds of videos out there on picking up stitches. If you've never done this before, I would go watch one. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up all the stitches on the back neck. I'm going to pick up the stitches down the vertical sides. And then when we get into the slope, I'm going to have a look at the stitch count that I've picked up, what the pattern says I should pick up, and then we'll take a look at how much space I have left to do that in and how we're going to break it down to fit the rest of those stitches in. In the V-neck, I'm going to need an uneven number of stitches. I'm going to need 4 plus 1 because there is this center stitch for doing the center double decrease in the middle to accommodate the V shaping. Okay, I've picked up the stitches on the back neck and down the more or less vertical parts of the V-neck. And I've counted and compared what I picked up to what the pattern says I should have in those areas. So first of all, across the back neck from shoulder to shoulder, the pattern says I should have 46. Now, I don't want to brag here, but I did not look at the stitch counts the pattern called for. I just picked this stuff up the way I usually pick things up. And guess what? The pattern says from shoulder to shoulder, I should have 46 stitches. I have 45. So I'm short one. That's okay. I'll keep note of that. When I come around on my first round, I'll grab an extra stitch somewhere where there's a bit of a gap on the back neck. Down the sides, I picked up exactly 18 stitches down each side. Didn't count first. It just happened that way. I'm supposed to have, from the shoulder down to the V, 54 stitches. I have 18. So what that means is I need to pick up 36 stitches from this point to the center of my V. These weird little white things were there because they asked for an extra cast on stitch at the neck edge so that there would be a selvage stitch to pick up into when you're picking up stitches. Very clever. I'd never seen anyone done that before. I'm going to add this to my repertoire. I'm just going to pull them out now because we don't need them anymore. Okay, so we need to pick up 36 stitches. Half of 36 is 18. So let's just fold this in half and put a locking stitch marker. Half of 18 is 9. Put a locking stitch marker. And then fold down here and put a locking stitch marker. So now, this isn't too hard. Now all I've got to do is pick up 9 from here to here, pick up 9 from here to here, pick up 9 from here to here. If I don't do it perfectly, it's not that big a deal to just pull back a few stitches, add an extra one until I have 9 in those sections. Does not have to be absolutely perfect. Just get 9 stitches between those two. Now, of course, you don't want them all bunched up over here and then a big leap to this one, but relatively evenly. They don't have to be picked up exactly the same way in each section, just relatively evenly. By the time you've knit that 2x2 rib, it's all going to look good. The key is you get the same number of stitches on each side. We end up with multiples of 4 plus 1 for the center for the V-neck shaping, and we're good. So I'm going to finish picking these up and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, all done. I have picked up all the neckline stitches. No fuss, no muss, no redos. Now, you will have noticed, those of you with eagle eyes, that I started picking up that round in a really weird spot, like down about here in the front. I'm not leaving it there. I've taken that first stretch back to the shoulder. And I'm going to start and end my round up on the shoulder seam, which is pretty much where you always start and end a neckline round for a neck. It's a more discreet spot. It would be really obvious to have a break in the stitches, no matter how cleanly you can sew it together, to have it right here. So I just pulled back, which was on this side, I just pulled back those first 18 stitches I had picked up and picked them up again back to the shoulder. So now I'm all the way around. The only thing I have to remember to do as I go whipping around doing my neck finishing is that I have to pick up one more stitch in the back because I'm missing one to make sure that my 2x2 rib is going to work. So I'm going to work on this. We're into the home stretch now. And when this is done, I'll come back and show you the finished object. And then it's going in a box and it's going in the mail. Are you ready for this? Ta-da! It's finished. Look at this baby. Look at that perfect neckline. Look at those perfect armholes. Beautifully blocked, smooth ribbing. Yes, this is just a simple vanilla men's vest, but absolutely perfectly executed. Yeah, I know I'm bragging, but I happen to be very proud of how this turned out. It looks fantastic. Now, I would love to sit here and hang on to this and show it to you all day, but as you know, I'm on a deadline. I need to get this wrapped up and to the post office ASAP, and then I will come back and we will talk about charging for this knitting. See you then. Okay, let's talk about the money. How do I charge for commissions when I take them? I do not charge by the hour. It's just virtually impossible to keep track of your actual knitting time. Maybe you're one of those highly disciplined people who can turn a timer on and off every time they put down and pick up their knitting. That's not me. So here's what I do. Years ago, I did a bit of research and I found out that a lot of commission knitters charge by the yard and then add extras on if necessary. That made a lot of sense to me. How much yarn is going into the project is a pretty good indication of how long it's going to take. So I charge 15 to 20 cents per yard, depending on the complexity of the pattern. And then I may add some extra dough for designing, for a heavily modified project, and maybe even for having to spend time picking out a pattern and purchasing the yarn. Some people are going to hand you a pattern in yarn and say, please make this. That wasn't the case for me. I just had someone say, make a vest. And it was up to me to make that vest happen, pick out the yarn, all of that. That all takes time. Now, this project was just a straight up classic vanilla man's vest. If I were charging this to a regular client, I would charge 15 cents a yard. I know how much yarn I bought. I weighed the leftover yarn when I was done, so I know how much I used. I used 1,640 yards. Multiply that by 15 cents per yard, and that equals $123. I'm going to round that up to $125. The yarn itself, including shipping, costs $135. That brings the total for this particular garment to $260. And then I might tack on a little bit more for the hour or so that I spent finding the pattern and purchasing the yarn. So let's go back and subtract the amount that the yarn costs and just go back to that $125 that I would charge for the knitting. The next question is, well, how long did it take you to knit that vest? That's an excellent question. I really don't know, but I'm going to guess maybe 25 hours. That seems about right. I'm not the fastest knitter, and I'm very careful. 125 divided by 25 is a whopping $5 an hour. Now, I don't know what it is where you live, but in Canada, the federal minimum wage is $17.30 an hour. So my measly $5 an hour for knitting is not even close to minimum wage. If I had charged minimum wage for this vest, the total for the knitting would have come to $432.50. Is this vest worth $432.50? Of course it is. However, that's going to be outside the budget of most people for a gift. When you add the cost of the yarn back onto that, you're up around $570. That's a lot of money for a garment. Customers willing to pay that are going to be relatively rare. Bill Gates, call me. However, if you're just in it for the love of knitting and being able to make a few extra bucks an hour during your knitting time appeals to you, then by all means, go for it. I just really want you to understand what you're getting into when you agree to apply your fabulous knitting skills to something you're going to charge for. So to summarize, here are the things that run through my mind that stop me 99% of the time from saying yes when I'm asked to knit something. Getting very little compensation for your time. Lots of careful preparation to make sure you minimize errors, because any errors you make are going to be on you. You can't really charge for them. Working to a deadline. Oof. And the stress of meeting the client's expectations. No matter how beautifully you knit that garment, you're never quite sure until you hand it over if they're going to be happy with it. Fortunately, in my case, he was super happy with it. Look at him. He looks great. Don't you love that navy blue with all that orange? And he's got Daniel Craig's face because I heart Daniel Craig. So let us know. Do you knit for money? Have you ever knit for money? How did it go? Was it worth it? Will you never do it again? Are you one of those rare souls who have found the perfect combination of project and price that makes it something that's viable for you as extra income, or maybe your whole income? We're all super curious. Let us know down in the comments. Now, before you go, I've got big news. If you're a regular viewer or a subscriber, or you're brand new here and you just really like what you saw today, you can now become a member of the Knicoleknits After Hours Lounge and be an After Hours Lounger. Right down below this video, right under the title, sometimes beside the subscribe button, there's another little button that says join. Go ahead and click on that. There's a short little video in there that will explain all about what's going on in the After Hours Lounge and the benefits of being an After Hours Lounger. And if you're not interested in that, totally fine. Absolutely nothing's going to change on the regular channel. This is just some extra fun for people who just want more. In the meantime, here's a video for you to check out. Keep those needles clicking. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye. And we'll see you next week.